At 9:47 a.m. on December 19, 1944, Private Lucas Merrick crouched behind a crumbling stone wall 90 yards from a German Panzerspähwagen armored car, watching its 20mm autocannon sweep the tree line where 19 American paratroopers lay pinned. His M1 Garand held 8 rounds he couldn't hit anything with. His marksmanship scores ranked bottom 10th percentile. In the next 43 seconds, Merrick would flip an 8-ton armored vehicle using a weapon that hadn't seen military use since the Roman Empire, proving that the most dangerous soldiers aren't always the ones who follow doctrine, but farm boys from Oklahoma who understand that physics doesn't care whether your weapon was forged last year or 3,000 years ago. The leather sling wrapped around his waist violated no army regulations because no one had thought to regulate it. Who brings a Bronze Age shepherd's tool to modern warfare? By nightfall, Lieutenant Hastings would try to write a report explaining what he'd witnessed. He would fail. By week's end, German intelligence would warn their forces about Der Schleuderer, the slinger, an American who killed from impossible distances with no muzzle flash, no sound, just rocks moving faster than fastballs. Nobody at Fort Sill ever taught what Merrick did with that sling. They taught him rifle maintenance, proper sight alignment, trigger discipline. They never taught him that a 4-ounce stone released at 120 miles per hour hits with enough force to crack a skull at 200 yards, or that 6 of them, placed with mathematical precision, could destabilize 8 tons of German steel. The fog hung over the forest like a burial shroud, thick and wet and cold enough to freeze the breath in a man's lungs. Bodies lay scattered across the mud, American, German. It didn't matter anymore. Den had made them all the same. The gunfire had stopped an hour ago, leaving only the sound of wind through shattered trees and the distant rumble of armor moving through the valley below. In the silence, the survivors whispered. They spoke of a man who shouldn't have been there, a soldier who carried no rifle, no grenades, no bayonet, a man who'd been laughed out of 3 different platoons before some desperate captain threw him into the 101st Airborne as a last resort. They said he was simple, touched, a farm boy who'd brought a child's toy to war. They said he'd killed a German lieutenant at 400 yards with a rock. The reports were impossible, of course. The kind of soldier's tale that spreads through trenches when men are too tired and too scared to know what's real anymore. But the German lieutenant was real. His body had been found in a foxhole with his skull caved in, a smooth river stone embedded so deep the medics couldn't extract it. No gunshot, no shrapnel, just blunt force trauma delivered from a distance that made marksmen shake their heads and walk away. The whispers grew. By December, they said he'd killed 17 men. By Christmas, they said he'd stopped a panzer advance single-handedly. By the time the Battle of the Bulge turned in the Allies' favor, his name had become something between a legend and a ghost story. Private Lucas Merrick. The man with the sling. The soldiers who survived at Bastogne would tell the story for the rest of their lives, though most wouldn't be believed. They'd describe how a skinny kid from Oklahoma, armed with nothing but leather and rope and stones from a Belgian creek, had done something no man should have been able to do. Something that violated physics, military doctrine, and common sense. They'd describe how he'd flipped an armored car. This is that story. Not the sanitized version in the official reports, not the Hollywood myth that came later, but the real account, as told by the men who were there, who saw it happen, who lived through the impossible, and spent the rest of their lives trying to explain it to people who weren't. Some doors to the past should remain closed. This isn't one of them. Lucas Merrick was born in 1923 in a town called Sentinel, Oklahoma. Population 847, mostly dust and disappointment. His father ran a failing cattle ranch on land so dry you could watch tumbleweeds race across the same stretch of nothing for hours. His mother died when Lucas was 6. Consumption, they said, though his father always claimed it was the land itself that killed her. That Oklahoma had a way of draining the life out of soft things. Lucas wasn't soft, but he wasn't hard either. He was something in between, wiry and quiet, with hands too large for his arms and eyes that never quite focused on what people expected. Teachers called him slow. Other kids called him worse. He failed the 8th grade twice, not because he was stupid, but because he'd disappear for days at a time, wandering the red dirt hills with a pouch of stones and a strip of leather he'd cut from his father's old work belt. He was hunting, not with a rifle. The Merricks couldn't afford ammunition after the Dust Bowl swallowed their herd. Lucas hunted the way his Cherokee grandfather had taught him before the old man died, the way men had hunted for thousands of years before gunpowder, with a sling, not a slingshot. A sling, the weapon of shepherds and ancient armies, the tool that had killed Goliath and broken Roman formations. A simple strip of leather or rope with a pouch in the middle, spun overhead until physics and trajectory and pure practiced instinct sent a projectile faster than most men could throw a baseball. Lucas was 11 when he killed his first jackrabbit at 40 yards. 13 when he brought down a coyote that had been terrorizing the neighboring ranch. 15 when he hit a fence post at 200 yards, dead center, 5 times in a row, while his father watched with something like fear in his eyes. "Boy," his father said that evening, hands shaking around a glass of cheap whiskey, "you got a devil's gift. Ain't natural what you can do." Lucas didn't respond, didn't know how to explain that it wasn't a gift, wasn't magic. It was mathematics and muscle memory, and 10,000 hours of practice in the hills where no one could see him fail. It was understanding trajectory and wind and the precise moment of release that turned a stone into a bullet. It was the only thing he'd ever been good at. When Pearl Harbor was bombed in December 1941, Lucas was 18 and working at a grain elevator for 30 cents an hour. He enlisted the next day, walking 12 miles to the recruitment office in Clinton because his father's truck had been repossessed. The recruiter was a tired-looking sergeant who barely glanced at Lucas's paperwork before stamping it approved. "Infantry training starts in 6 weeks, the sergeant said. "You know how to shoot a rifle?" "No, sir," Lucas admitted, "but I can hit what I aim at." The sergeant laughed. "Son, everyone thinks they can shoot until they try it under fire. You'll learn." Lucas wanted to show him, wanted to pull out the sling he carried everywhere, wanted to demonstrate on the recruiting poster across the room, wanted to prove he wasn't just another farm boy with delusions of heroism. But the sergeant was already calling for the next recruit, and Lucas had learned long ago that people only believed what they could see, and sometimes not even then. Fort Sill, Oklahoma, January 1942. Basic training was a humiliation. Lucas could run the obstacle course in record time. His legs were used to covering miles of rough terrain. He could march for hours without complaint. He could survive on almost nothing, having grown up on Depression-era rations. But he couldn't shoot. Not with a rifle. Not the way the Army wanted. The M1 Garand was a beautiful weapon. Semi-automatic, .30-06 caliber, accurate to 500 yards in trained hands. But Lucas's hands weren't trained for triggers and sights, and the heavy recoil that bruised his shoulder purple. His body knew the smooth, circular motion of the sling, the buildup of centrifugal force, the precise moment of release. Rifles felt wrong, alien, like trying to write with his offhand. His qualifying scores were abysmal. He barely passed marksmanship, ranking in the bottom 10% of his company. The drill instructors noticed. "Merrick!" Sergeant Kowalski's voice cut across the firing range like a whip crack. "What the hell was that?" Lucas lowered the Garand, smoke still rising from the barrel. Downrange, his target showed 2 hits, both in the outer rings. Most recruits had at least 6 clustered near center mass. "Sorry, Sergeant. I'll do better." "Better?" Kowalski stormed over, his face red beneath his campaign hat. "Son, I've seen Girl Scouts shoot straighter than you. How the hell did you pass the physical? You got working eyes?" "Yes, Sergeant." "Then use them. This ain't squirrel hunting back in whatever shit-kicker town you crawled out of. This is modern warfare. You point, you shoot, you kill the bastard trying to kill you. It's not complicated." Lucas wanted to explain that it was complicated, that his brain processed trajectory differently, that he could hit a moving target at 200 yards if someone would just let him use the weapon. His body understood. But explaining would mean demonstrating. And demonstrating would mean revealing the sling wrapped around his waist beneath his uniform shirt. He'd tried showing it once during the first week. Had approached Sergeant Kowalski after hours with the leather strip in hand, asking permission to demonstrate an alternative marksmanship method. Kowalski had stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "Is that a goddamn slingshot?" "A sling, Sergeant. Different from a... I don't care if it's a magic fucking wand, Merrick. We're training soldiers, not circus performers. You will learn to shoot a rifle, or you will wash out. Understood?" "Yes, Sergeant." But Lucas kept the sling. Wore it under his uniform, practiced in secret after lights out, sneaking behind the barracks with a pouch of stones he'd collected from the base perimeter. And he got better, faster, more accurate. By the end of basic training, he could hit a tin can at 150 yards in total darkness, using only sound and instinct to guide his aim. None of it mattered. He graduated at the bottom of his class, barely qualified for infantry deployment. The assignment officer looked at his scores and sighed. "Merrick, you're being assigned to the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment as a replacement. They need bodies, and you've got a pulse. Try not to shoot any of our guys by mistake." The 506th. Airborne. Elite soldiers who jumped out of perfectly good airplanes into enemy territory with nothing but their training and their balls. Lucas had seen paratroopers in training, hard men with harder eyes, the kind who'd survived jump school and came out believing they were invincible. They were going to eat him alive. Camp Toccoa, Georgia, May 1942. The 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, had a reputation. They were cocky, aggressive, and proud to the point of arrogance. They'd earned it. Jump training had a 40% washout rate. The men who made it through were conditioned to believe they were the best soldiers in the Army. Lucas arrived on a Tuesday, carrying his duffel and his secret shame. "Fresh meat!" someone yelled as he entered the barracks. "Hey, everyone, we got a replacement." The room was full of paratroopers in various states of undress, cleaning weapons, writing letters, playing cards. They looked up with the predatory interest of apex predators spotting wounded prey. A stocky corporal with a Brooklyn accent approached, grinning. "What's your name, replacement?" "Merrick, Corporal. Private Lucas Merrick." "Merrick, you know how to jump, Merrick." "I will, Corporal." "You will?" The corporal laughed. "Meaning you haven't. Meaning they sent us a fucking leg." He turned to the others. "We got a leg, boys. A goddamn ground pounder." The mockery came fast and merciless. Leg was paratrooper slang for regular infantry, an insult suggesting you were too weak or too scared to jump. Lucas tried to ignore it, tried to unpack his gear quietly, but the corporal wasn't done. "Let's see your qualifications, Merrick. You a sharpshooter, expert marksman? What makes you special enough to join the Screaming Eagles?" Lucas hesitated. "I qualified, Corporal." "Qualified, that's it? Just barely scraped by?" The corporal snatched Lucas's paperwork from his footlocker, scanning it. "Holy shit. Bottom 10th percentile in marksmanship. You can barely hit the broad side of a barn, and they put you in airborne? I can hit what I aim at, Corporal." "Yeah? Prove it." The challenge hung in the air. Lucas felt every eye in the barracks on him, felt the weight of expectations and contempt. This was the moment. Show them the sling. Demonstrate what he could do, earn their respect. Or keep his mouth shut and endure. He kept his mouth shut. "That's what I thought," the corporal said, disgusted. "Another warm body to fill the ranks. Just try not to get anyone killed, Leg." The weeks that followed were brutal. Lucas completed jump training. Barely. He froze on his first tower jump. Had to be pushed out by the instructor. On his first live jump from a C-47, he tangled his lines and landed hard enough to sprain his ankle. The paratroopers around him were disappointed, but not surprised. "Merrick's going to get himself killed before we even see combat," someone muttered. "Worse, he'll get one of us killed." But Lucas kept practicing. Every night, after the others were asleep, he'd slip out to the edge of camp with his sling and his stones. The Georgia woods became his training ground. He learned to compensate for humidity, for wind through the trees, for the way sound carried differently in the dense forest. He hit targets the size of quarters at 100 yards. He learned to judge distance in the dark, to aim by starlight, to reload in under 2 seconds. And he thought about David and Goliath. Everyone knew the story. The shepherd boy who killed a giant with a sling and a stone. But most people thought it was a fairy tale, a biblical myth about faith conquering strength. Lucas knew better. He'd researched it obsessively, read historical accounts of ancient slingers, studied Roman records of Balearic mercenaries who could crack skulls from 200 yards away. The sling wasn't a toy. It was a weapon of war, proven across millennia. Forgotten only because gunpowder had made it obsolete. But what if circumstances removed gunpowder from the equation? What if you were behind enemy lines with no ammunition? What if you needed to kill silently, from distance, with nothing but rocks and physics? What if everyone was wrong about what made a weapon dangerous? Normandy, France, June 6, 1944. D-Day should have been Lucas's death. The 506th jumped at 1:30 hours before the beach landings, with orders to secure causeway exits and disrupt German reinforcements. Lucas was in Stick 14, crammed into a C-47 with 17 other paratroopers, all of them checking equipment with the mechanical precision of men who'd done this 100 times in training. Lucas checked his equipment too: rifle, ammo pouches, grenades, entrenching tool, first aid kit. And beneath it all, hidden against his skin, the sling. He'd upgraded it since basic training, using parachute cord and leather from a salvaged boot. Stronger, more flexible. He'd collected stones in Georgia, smooth river rocks that fit perfectly in the pouch. Weight and balance calculated through endless practice. He was ready. The jump was chaos. German anti-aircraft fire lit the sky. The C-47s scattered, pilots desperately trying to avoid the flak. Lucas's plane was hit, not critically, but enough to throw off the drop zone. When the green light flashed and the jump master screamed, "Go! Go! Go!" Lucas jumped into darkness with no idea where he'd land. He hit the ground hard in a flooded field, water up to his chest, his parachute tangling in the branches of a half-submerged tree. Around him, scattered across miles of French countryside, the 506th was lost, fragmented into small groups, trying to regroup in hostile territory. Lucas cut himself free, waded to solid ground, and immediately realized he was alone. No familiar faces, no officers, no radio contact, just him, soaking wet in Nazi-occupied France, with a rifle he could barely shoot and a sling no one believed in. This is where the legend should have begun. Instead, it almost ended. Lucas spent the first 3 hours lost, following compass headings that led him in circles. He encountered a German patrol at dawn, 4 Wehrmacht soldiers smoking cigarettes by a hedgerow. He froze, hidden behind a stone wall, hand gripping his rifle. He could try to shoot them. Probably miss. Definitely alert every German in the area. Or Lucas pulled out the sling, selected a stone from his pouch. Smooth, rounded, roughly 3 ounces. He'd practiced this scenario 1,000 times. Multiple targets. Moving, armed. The math was simple. If he missed, he died. He didn't miss. The first stone hit the nearest soldier in the temple, dropping him instantly. The second stone caught the next soldier in the throat as he turned, crushing his larynx before he could scream. The third and fourth soldiers fumbled for their weapons, but Lucas was already spinning, already releasing. And the stones struck with brutal precision, one in the face, one in the chest, both men down. 4 seconds. 4 stones. 4 kills. Lucas stood there, shaking, staring at what he'd done. The silence was absolute. No gunshots, no alerts. Just 4 bodies and a farm boy who'd just proved David versus Goliath wasn't a myth. He took their ammunition. Wouldn't use it, but it looked good on his belt. Then he moved on, following the sound of distant gunfire, trying to find friendly forces. He found them 3 hours later. A mixed group of 506th and 502nd paratroopers, maybe 20 men, holed up in a farmhouse outside Sainte-Mère-Église. They were tired, scared, and running low on ammo. The lieutenant in charge was named Hastings, a West Point grad with a shattered leg, and the kind of desperation that makes commanders do stupid things. "You got a weapon?" Hastings asked when Lucas stumbled through the door. "Yes, sir." "Can you shoot?" Lucas hesitated. Then, "I can kill, sir. Just not the way you expect." Hastings stared at him. I don't care if you throw rocks, Private. We're outnumbered, undersupplied, and waiting for relief that might not come. If you can fight, you're in. If not, you can fuck off and find another unit. I can fight, sir. Then welcome to the shit show. The farmhouse group held for 3 days, repelling German probes, rationing ammunition, eating whatever they could scavenge. Lucas fought alongside them, but carefully. He used his rifle when necessary, poorly, wasting bullets, but mostly he hung back, conserving resources, waiting for the moment his real weapon would matter. The other soldiers noticed. Merrick's a coward, someone muttered on day 2. Barely shoots, just hides and lets us do the work. He's conserving ammo, another soldier countered. Bullshit. He can't shoot. I've seen him. Couldn't hit a Nazi if the bastard was 10 feet away. The rumors spread. By day 3, even Lieutenant Hastings was looking at Lucas with suspicion. Merrick, you're carrying a full loadout of magazines. Why aren't you engaging? Waiting for the right moment, sir. The right moment is when Germans are trying to kill us, Private. Yes, sir. But Lucas knew something the others didn't. He'd been watching the German patterns, studying their approach routes, counting their forces. They weren't just probing. They were preparing for a major assault. And when it came, rifles wouldn't be enough. The assault came at dawn on day 4. 30 Germans, maybe more, supported by a Panzerspähwagen, an 8-wheeled armored car mounted with a 20mm autogun, the kind of vehicle that could shred a farmhouse in minutes. Lieutenant Hastings saw it coming and made the call. Fall back! Everyone to the tree line! Move! Move! They ran, abandoning the farmhouse, carrying wounded, sprinting across open ground while the Panzerspähwagen's autocannon tore chunks out of the earth behind them. 3 men didn't make it, cut down by machine gun fire, bodies left behind. The survivors collapsed in the forest, gasping, defeated. We're fucked, someone said. That armored car will roll right over us. We've got 1 bazooka, Hastings said. 1 rocket. It might penetrate. Might. The soldier with the bazooka, a Texan named Briggs, shook his head. That thing's front armor is too thick. I'd need a side shot, and we're not getting close enough for that. Then we're fucked, someone repeated. Lucas looked at the Panzerspähwagen, now parked in front of the farmhouse, German infantry using it as cover. He'd seen armored cars before, studied them in training. 8 wheels meant stability, but also vulnerability. The driver sat in front, vision limited to narrow slits. The gunner was exposed in the top turret, and the vehicle's center of gravity, with all that armor and the autocannon, was high, dangerously high. An idea formed in small, impossible. But everything about this war was impossible, and Lucas was tired of being called a coward. He stood up. Sir, he said to Hastings, I can take out that armored car. The lieutenant stared at him. With what? Strong language. With this. Lucas pulled out the sling. The laughter was immediate and vicious. Are you fucking kidding me? Briggs exploded. That's a goddamn toy. It's a weapon, sir. Same weapon that's killed hundreds of men across human history. Yeah, in the fucking Bronze Age. Merrick, Hastings said, his voice careful. We don't have time for jokes. We need real solutions. This is real, sir. I can prove it. How? Lucas pointed to a tree branch about 80 yards away. That branch. The one hanging over the path. I'll hit it 3 times. 3 different points. If I miss, you can shoot me yourself. Hastings considered. They had nothing to lose. Fine. Show me. Lucas loaded the sling, selected a stone, spun it overhead. The familiar circular motion, building force, calculating trajectory. Released. The stone struck the branch dead center with a crack like a gunshot. Before anyone could react, Lucas loaded again. Spun. Released. Second stone hit 4 feet to the left. Third stone hit 4 feet to the right. 3 shots, 3 hits, 5 seconds. The forest was silent. Holy shit, someone whispered. Hastings stared at the branch, then at Lucas. How hard do those hit? Hard enough to crack bone at this range, sir. I killed 4 Germans 2 days ago. Silently. 1 stone each. 4 Germans. Yes, sir. Why the hell didn't you mention this before? Because nobody listens, sir. They just laugh. Hastings looked at the Panzerspähwagen, then back at Lucas. You think you can kill the crew with that? I can kill the crew, sir. But I can do something better. What's better than killing them? Lucas smiled. The first genuine smile since basic training. I can flip it. Flip it, Briggs repeated slowly. You're going to flip an armored car with a sling and rocks. Yes. You're out of your goddamn mind. Maybe, Lucas admitted. But it's possible. That vehicle weighs about 8 tons. Center of gravity is high because of the turret and armor plating. It's on uneven ground, old farmland, ruts, and holes everywhere. If I can hit the wheels at the right angle with enough force, I can destabilize it, make it tip. Even if you could hit the wheels, which is a big fucking if, rocks aren't going to damage armored wheels. I'm not trying to damage them. I'm trying to shift weight distribution, create momentum. If I hit the upper wheel assembly on one side while the vehicle's turning or moving, I can start a tip. Once it starts, physics does the rest. Hastings was studying him now with new eyes. Where'd you learn this? Physics class, sir. And a lot of practice. You failed physics, Merrick. It's in your file. Failed the tests, sir. Didn't fail the understanding. Lieutenant Hastings looked at his men, exhausted, running on fumes and desperation. Looked at the Panzerspähwagen, which was starting to move, pushing forward to flush them out of the woods. If this doesn't work, we're all dead anyway, Hastings said finally. Briggs, get in position with that bazooka. Wait for Merrick's signal. If he actually manages to tip that thing, you put a rocket through its belly. Understood? Yes, sir. The rest of you, suppressing fire on my command. Keep those infantry off Merrick while he works his magic. Hastings turned to Lucas. How close do you need to be? 100 yards, sir. Maybe less. That's inside their effective range. Yes, sir. You'll be exposed. Yes, sir. Hastings gripped Lucas's shoulder. You better not be crazy, Private. Too late for that, sir. Lucas moved through the woods like a ghost, circling wide to get an angle on the Panzerspähwagen's right side. The vehicle was advancing slowly, turret swiveling, searching for targets. German infantry followed behind it, using it as a mobile shield. 90 yards away, Lucas found his position, behind a low stone wall that offered minimal cover but perfect line of sight. He laid out his stones, 6 of them, each selected for weight and shape. Smooth river rocks, roughly 4 ounces each. At the speeds he could generate, they'd hit with approximately 2,000 pounds of force per square inch. Enough to crack a skull. Maybe enough to shift an 8-ton vehicle, he hoped. The sling felt alive in his hands. He'd made hundreds of these, practiced with thousands of stones. But this was different. This was the moment that would either validate everything he'd believed or get him killed, proving a point. Lucas breathed, focused. Watched the Panzerspähwagen roll forward. Watched the wheels turn, calculated angles and trajectories, and that perfect split-second moment when force would overcome inertia. He loaded the first stone. The Panzerspähwagen hit a rut, tilted slightly. That was the moment. Lucas spun the sling overhead. 1 rotation, 2, 3, building force exponentially. Released. The stone left the pouch at approximately 120 miles per hour, spinning, tracing an arc through the morning air. It struck the upper wheel assembly on the right side with a metallic clang that echoed across the field. The wheel buckled. Not broke, buckled. The rim deformed, the tire shredded, and the vehicle lurched right. The driver tried to compensate, turning left, but that exposed the vehicle's side. Lucas was already loading the second stone. Spin, release. Second stone hit the same wheel. Lower this time, directly into the suspension assembly. Something snapped. Lucas heard it, even from 90 yards away. The right side dropped 6 inches, throwing the vehicle off balance. The German commander, in the turret, finally realized what was happening. He swung the autocannon toward Lucas's position, searching for the threat. Third stone. Lucas didn't aim for the wheels this time. He aimed for the commander. The stone hit the man square in the face, snapping his head back, dropping him into the turret. The autocannon went silent. German infantry started shouting, pointing. They'd located him. Bullets began kicking up dirt around the stone wall. Fourth stone. Another wheel. Same side, same brutal precision. The suspension collapsed completely now. The right side of the Panzerspähwagen grinding into the dirt. The driver panicked, gunned the engine, trying to move forward. But the 3 remaining wheels on the left side had all the vehicle's weight now. The Panzerspähwagen tilted. Fifth stone. Lucas aimed high, hit the turret itself, adding force to the tilt. The physics were cascading now, momentum building. The vehicle was tipping, slowly but inevitably, fighting gravity and losing. "Now!" Lieutenant Hastings screamed from the woods. "Suppressing fire!" 20 rifles opened up, pinning the German infantry. Briggs broke from cover, bazooka on his shoulder, running toward a better angle. Sixth stone. Lucas poured everything into this one. All his strength, all his practice, all the mockery and doubt, and years of being called crazy. He spun the sling faster than he'd ever spun it, built force until his shoulders screamed, and released. The stone struck the top of the turret at the exact moment the vehicle's center of gravity reached the tipping point. The Panzerspähwagen went over. It happened almost in slow motion. 8 tons of steel and armor tipping past the point of no return, crashing onto its side with a sound like thunder, spilling crew members, exposing its vulnerable underside. Briggs didn't hesitate. He dropped to one knee, aimed, and fired. The bazooka rocket punched through the Panzerspähwagen's belly armor, and the vehicle exploded. Fuel tank, ammunition, everything. The blast threw German infantry to the ground, killed half of them instantly, sent the rest running. The American soldiers charged from the woods, firing, screaming, capitalizing on the chaos. The battle lasted 3 more minutes, but the outcome was never in doubt. Without the armored car, the Germans broke. Lucas stood behind the stone wall, hands shaking, still holding the sling. He'd done it. Actually, done it. Flipped an armored car with rocks and physics and the weapon everyone called a toy. Lieutenant Hastings found him there 5 minutes later. "Private Merrick," Hastings said quietly, "what the fuck did I just watch?" "David versus Goliath, sir." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have, sir." Hastings looked at the burning wreckage of the Panzerspähwagen, at the dead Germans, at the stone wall where Lucas had performed the impossible. "Nobody's ever going to believe this," Hastings said. "I know, sir. I'm putting you in for a commendation." "Please don't, sir." "Why the hell not?" "Because," Lucas said, finally meeting the lieutenant's eyes, "I'd like to keep doing this. And the moment command finds out, they'll pull me for propaganda, or send me to teach classes, or find some other way to turn it into a circus. I just want to fight, sir. My way." Hastings considered. "Your way just saved 20 lives." "Yes, sir." "Fine, no commendation. But you're getting promoted to corporal, and you're never touching a rifle again unless you want to. That sling is your primary weapon now, official." "Thank you, sir." Word spread anyway. Stories like that can't be contained. By the time the 506th reached Bastogne in December, every man in the division had heard some version of the tale. Most didn't believe it. But they'd seen Lucas fight, seen him kill German snipers from 200 yards, seen him take out machine gun nests silently, seen him operate in ways that made marksmen jealous. The Germans heard too. Started calling him Der Schleuderer, the slinger. Warned each other about the American who killed from impossible distances with no sound, no muzzle flash, just sudden death. At Bastogne, surrounded by German forces, freezing and undersupplied, Lucas became essential. He could kill sentries without alerting patrols, could hit officers behind enemy lines, could take out communications equipment, vehicle tires, anything that needed precision destruction without explosives. But mostly, he killed. The official count by war's end was 63 confirmed enemy, KIA attributable to Lucas Merrick. Unofficial count was over 100. He never confirmed or denied the numbers, just kept collecting stones, kept practicing, kept perfecting a weapon that had been forgotten by modern warfare. His platoon stopped mocking him after the armored car incident, started protecting him instead, gave him the best positions, the clearest sight lines, the smoothest stones they could find, treated him with a respect that bordered on superstition. "Merrick's got magic," someone said during the siege. "Merrick's got physics," another soldier corrected. "Which is scarier?" Lieutenant Hastings was promoted to captain after Bastogne, eventually made it to major. He kept his promise, never filed official reports about Lucas's methods, never drew attention to the farm boy with the ancient weapon, just let him work. Years later, after the war, Hastings would be asked about the strangest thing he'd seen in combat. "I watched a kid from Oklahoma flip an armored car with rocks," he'd say, "and before you call bullshit, I've got 19 witnesses who'll swear the same." But nobody ever really believed him. Lucas Merrick survived the war, came home to Oklahoma in 1945, received an honorable discharge and a Purple Heart for wounds sustained in the bulge. The citation was vague, exemplary service under fire, and mentioned nothing about slings or armored cars or the impossible things he'd done. He went back to Sentinel, back to the failing ranch, back to a life of dust and disappointment. His father had died while Lucas was overseas. The land was his now, worthless as it was. He never talked about the war, refused interviews, avoided veteran reunions, turned down a request from a Hollywood producer who wanted to make a movie about that slingshot guy from the 101st. But he kept the sling, kept practicing. And sometimes, on clear mornings when the Oklahoma wind was calm, he'd walk out to the red dirt hills and send stones flying toward distant targets that only he could see. The old skills never faded. In 1957, a reporter from Stars and Stripes tracked him down, determined to verify the legend. Found Lucas fixing a fence on his property, weathered and quiet, and nothing like the hero from the stories. "Mr. Merrick," the reporter said, "I've talked to a dozen men from your division. They all tell the same story. You flipped a German armored car using only a sling. Is it true?" Lucas hammered another fence post, didn't look up. "Lot of strange things happened in the war." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. But if you could just confirm." "I can't confirm anything, except I did my job and came home." Same as thousands of other soldiers. That's all. The reporter tried a different approach. The men who fought with you, they say you were the best soldier they ever saw. That you could kill from distances that shouldn't be possible. That you saved lives when conventional weapons failed. Lucas finally looked up, and the reporter saw something in those eyes. Something hard and old and tired. "You want to know the truth?" Lucas said quietly. "The truth is war makes men desperate, makes them believe in magic when there's only math, makes them remember impossible things because the possible things as were too horrible. I fought. I survived. My friends didn't. That's the story. But the armored car was combat, chaos. You ever been in combat, son?" "No, sir." "Then you don't know what you see or don't see. You don't know what's real, or what your brain invents to make sense of the senseless. Maybe I hit an armored car with rocks. Maybe I didn't. Either way, men died. Doesn't make me a hero. Makes me a survivor." Lucas turned back to his fence work, conversation over. The reporter tried a few more questions, got nothing but silence, eventually gave up and left. The article was never published. The legend remained unconfirmed, trapped in the memories of old soldiers and the stories they told each other over whiskey and cigarettes. Lucas Merrick died in 1989, 76 years old, alone on his ranch. Heart attack, probably. The neighbors found him 3 days later, sitting in a chair on his porch, the sling wrapped around his weathered hands. There was no funeral, no ceremony. He'd requested cremation. Ashes scattered in the red dirt hills where he'd learned to hunt as a boy. But among his possessions, the estate lawyer found something interesting. A journal, handwritten, leather-bound, filled with calculations and diagrams and detailed accounts of every shot Lucas had made during the war. Trajectories, wind speeds, stone weights, kill distances. And on the final page, dated December 19th, 1944, a single entry. "Today I flipped an armored car. Not because I'm a hero, not because I'm special, but because physics doesn't care about modern weapons or ancient weapons. It only cares about force and angle and the precise moment when everything aligns. They'll call it impossible. They'll call me crazy. But I did it anyway, Because sometimes the old ways work better than the new ways. Sometimes a stone is deadlier than a bullet. Sometimes a farm boy with a sling can change history. I won't tell them that, though. Let them think it was luck. Let them think it was magic. The truth is more frightening, that everything we've forgotten still works. That ancient weapons are only obsolete until circumstances make them necessary again. That war doesn't progress, it just cycles. I hope they never need to learn that lesson again. But I think they will. The journal was donated to the National WW2 Museum in New Orleans. It's kept in their archives, available to researchers who request it specifically. Most people never do. The story of the slinger remains obscure, a footnote in the larger narrative of the war. But the men who fought at Bastogne remember. The ones still alive, the ones who watched Lucas Merrick do the impossible, they know the truth. They know that on December 19th, 1944, a farm boy from Oklahoma, armed with leather and rope and stones from a Belgian creek, flipped an 8-ton armored car through pure physics and practiced skill. They know that ancient weapons aren't primitive, they're proven. And they know that sometimes the most dangerous soldier isn't the one with the biggest gun. It's the one everyone underestimates. The sling disappeared from warfare, not because it was ineffective, but because gunpowder made it unnecessary. Why train a soldier for years to achieve what a rifle could do in weeks? Why master a weapon that required perfect understanding of physics, trajectory, and thousands of hours of practice when firearms democratized killing? But the sling's potential never disappeared. The physics remained true, the mathematics unchanged. A 4-ounce stone released at 120 miles per hour hits with approximately 1,900 pounds of force, enough to penetrate medieval armor, shatter bone, kill a man at 200 yards. The Balearic slingers of ancient Rome could hit moving targets at 300 yards, could pierce shields, could break enemy formations before swords were ever drawn. Roman generals paid them premium wages because they knew the truth. The sling, in trained hands, was one of the deadliest weapons humanity ever created. Lucas Merrick proved it could still work in modern warfare. Not as a primary weapon for armies' logistics and training time made that impractical, but as a specialized tool for soldiers who understood its potential. The military never adopted it, never trained new slingers, never explored whether Lucas's feat could be replicated by others with sufficient practice. They filed his journal, classified his methods, and moved on to rockets and jets and nuclear weapons. But the knowledge remains. The physics remain. And somewhere, maybe, someone else is learning the old ways, practicing in secret, preparing for the moment when conventional weapons fail and ancient methods become necessary again. They'll call that person crazy until they see what a sling can do.